oh man, I feel bad for anybody who paid X amount for X game. And I'm just like, I don't have time to care about how other people spend their money. I can't control them, nor would they. It's kind of like, I always kind of come back to kind of the relationship analogy. Like if you ever have a friend who's been dating this person who's just like awful, and you know they're awful, and eventually they break up, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so glad, welcome back. You know, like that was just like, that person was really rough, you know, and they're like, oh man, why didn't you say anything? It's like, if I did, I have enough life experience to try to tell you while you're in your honeymoon phase. If I told you that, I'm the bad guy, like you're not going to listen to me. You can't see the, you know, sometimes the flaws. And so that ends up being how I kind of view people, like the hype tax and people who pre-order and do these things. And that's why I want to talk to Chris a little bit about Starfield. Last week, Phil Spencer went on the Gaming Kinda cast talking about if Starfield is an 11 out of a 10 game, people aren't going to magically sell their PS5s, light them on fire, and come over to Xbox. I agree with that. Like, you know, and I think though, no matter what, especially on the heels of Redfall and it's just absolute abysmal launch, I think when I would say Encounter, like a lot of people are treating it like the worst game to ever launch, but I think they've easily forgotten about Cyberpunk. And I think there's a couple of people who are also in that same boat. You're like, you're telling me this game's worse than Cyberpunk? I beg to differ. Cyberpunk now, yes, but Cyberpunk then, absolutely not. What do you think about as we look forward to Starfield? Does this game have any shot in hell? As the guy who doesn't get hyped for video games, what's your honest take?
It's just Fallout in space, right?
It's Fallout in space, Skyrim in space is how people have kind of defined it, with guns. Obviously, you're in space, so give me a sword. That'd be kind of wild.
I mean, the problem with Redfall isn't that the people who played it and had a nice time didn't enjoy it. The problem with Cyberpunk isn't that people who played it and had a good experience didn't enjoy it. And that's why Cyberpunk has gotten better. Mm-hmm. They haven't added a bunch of content as necessarily. They've just made it not buggy. So like I think there's an idea that it's an old Nintendo quote, I think, that is a delayed game has the potential of being good, but a bad game will always be a bad game.
And that's no longer true though.
And so like in theory, there is always a chance until it releases that it could get better. But once it comes out, people just associate that with it. And so like the reason Cyberpunk got better is it didn't suddenly get better. It's the same game. They just fixed the bugs. Now that we have now that basically every game becomes some form of live service, because they're all digital and we have that ability. That also means that they've had the ability to start collecting money earlier. They can just ship it earlier. We'll just fix it in post. Because when you hire a team of testers, keep in mind that if you have, let's say your game sells only 1 million units, which means that all of the internet will determine that you're a complete failure. And those 1 million people only play your game for 10 minutes and then quit and go review bomb you. Okay? So you've got 10 million minutes of playtime in the beginning of your game, all within the first 10 minutes of your game. The first 10 minutes of your game, you could have playtesters play that thing over and over and over and over. But they just put in 19 years, I think, unless I did that math quickly wrong. 19 years of time of if your game testers could work 24/7 testing. So like they're gonna find bugs. And so then there's this big blank check of like, well, if they're gonna find bugs anyway, we might as well just let them find the bugs. So will it suck on launch? Probably. Like that's just my assumption on games now. Is I just assume they're gonna be buggy on launch. And that, as you noted, you pay the maximum price. Games do not go up in price as they age. So you pay the maximum price to be exposed to the most bugs. So outside of like jumping the line to avoid spoilers and getting to talk about it while everybody's hyped about it, playing it once it's like the Game of the Year edition a year later and it's half off, feels like the way to avoid bugs if you really hate them. Like Starfield's probably a great game a year from now, 2 years from now. That's my like not super over animated response. Is like if you want to play Cyberpunk, play it a year late. Like if you want to play Diablo 4, don't play in June.
Yeah, see me if you're 1 year
I'm
behind in
playing too,
gaming.
I don't mind.
If you play 1 year behind the hype train in gaming, you not only like save an insane amount of money, but then you also have the curated list of, okay, yeah, this is good and this this works. This really works. This really had a rough launch, but they've worked on it, and now it's like ready for your prime time. This is the same thing we see all the time within MMOs. Like oh yeah, like if you're there on launch day for an MMO, like there's certain things that as long as you're aware of them, you're gonna have a good experience. But if you're coming into an MMO in year 2, 3, 4, you're gonna end up having like so much, and usually that's what you end up seeing is a lot of people having a lot of really good excitement.
It's a great day to discover your first Monster Hunter game, your first Scrolls game, like your first go pick up the Pixel Remaster collection. Like it's a great day to do all this stuff for the first time now.
Mm.
And you get you're right, you get the best list. Your entire backlog could be bundled cheap. Only game of the year contenders, like only
Elden
the
Ring.
best. I want to play the best RPG. That's what I want to play. Okay, and my only requirement is that it has to be at least a year old. How far back can we go? As far as you want. You have a huge list of, and the important thing about that list is there are a lot of names not on that list because players have already played those and dismissed them. So you've got a bunch of people that have helped curate it down to where you're like, okay, cool, I'm picking across these 10 titles. So yeah, if the bugs really bother us, that would be the answer. But that's not how we consume the market. Like I'll be in Diablo 4 on day one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a buggy mess. Yeah, but I was
disconnects. Yeah,
I'm an MMO player. Like I'm already used to expansion launches being an absolute crapshoot. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, and like it just because I'm already conditioned for that. Like I don't know, and I see people get shocked by it in WoW and 14, like in expansion launches, and they're like, I took off exactly 48 hours from work, and I'm going to play the whole time, and then they're like, I didn't get to log in at all. That was definitely a risk you took. Like that was 100% a risk you took. The Endwalker launch was rough. That whole first week was rough, especially if you aren't somebody who had enough control over your schedule that you could like pivot to morning hours or something that took you outside of. If you only had peak hours, which is like that's why they're the peak hours. They're the easiest hours for everybody. Mm-hmm. If you only have peak hours, you were just screwed on Endwalker launch. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, that's what bit me. It got to the point where I was like, well, since it won't let me log in, I guess I'll play whenever I can. See y'all in a couple weeks. So that is what it is.